Perspective Reports. 50 states and 50 things they rank last in. Let's get it started. Alabama. Alabama ranks 49th out of 51 for the cost, access, and quality of mental health care, essentially tied for last among the 50 states. This systemic crisis is driven by a lack of providers and unaffordability, and it's symptomatic of broader poor health and economic challenges. The state consistently ranks near the bottom in overall health, youth mental health, and struggles with high murder rates often correlated with psychological distress, and faces a difficult cycle where poor health infrastructure limits the resources needed for improvement. Alaska. Alaska ranks 50th in the nation for quality of life. This is primarily due to the highest average weekly work hours, long commute times, and poor access to social recreational activities. The state's low population density, while part of its appeal, fosters social isolation and contributes to its consistently high violent crime rate. This frontier paradox means the state's defining characteristics, vastness and remoteness, are also the core drivers of its lowest in the nation ranking for resident well-being and safety. Arizona. Arizona's public education system ranks 51st among all states and Washington, D.C., performing poorly across K-12 performance, funding, safety, and higher education. It has the highest pupil-to-teacher ratio in the country, 23-1, leading to strained resources and poor academic outcomes. Only about 1/4 of students are proficient in math. This crisis is worsened by severe underfunding, a significant state budget deficit, and high teacher turnover driven by low wages and lack of support. Arkansas. Arkansas has the consistently worst performing healthcare system among the 50 states, ranking currently 48th out of 51, including DC. Its low score across 50 indicators is driven by extremely high rates of infant mortality, a large number of premature deaths from treatable causes. This systemic failure aligns with its ranking as the 48th healthiest state overall for 4 consecutive years. The poor health outcomes are deeply connected to high violent crime rates and low rankings on general social and economic development. California. California is the least affordable state to live in, ranking 50th nationally, largely due to having the highest housing costs in the country. This creates an extreme paradox. While California's $3.9 trillion economy is the world's 5th largest, its immense wealth does not translate into widespread opportunity. The high cost of living is exacerbated by its progressive tax system and labor laws, creating an economy of extremes where high business costs and prohibitively expensive basic necessities undermine the benefits of its powerful economic engine. Colorado. Colorado is tied for last for the lowest average quality of its universities. This is a major disconnect as the state ranks second for its percentage of adults with a bachelor's degree. The data shows that none of Colorado's universities, including its flagship institutions, crack the top 100 national rankings. This indicates the state relies on attracting educated individuals from elsewhere for its workforce rather than cultivating talent through top-tier homegrown institutions. Connecticut. Connecticut carries the highest state debt per capita in the United States, amounting to a staggering $26,187 for every resident. This immense debt is fueled by massive unfunded pension liabilities, which alone are nearly $8,000 per resident. This makes the state highly fiscally unstable, ranking 48th in the nation for fiscal health and receiving an F grade from financial watchdogs. This debt is a persistent long-term threat to the state's economic viability. Delaware. Delaware's economy distinguished itself by being the only state in the entire country to experience a decrease in its gross domestic product, GDP, in the fourth quarter of 2023, placing it dead last. This is part of a longer troubling trend. Its trailing 5-year GDP growth ranks 45th. This economic stagnation means the state's budget is increasingly reliant on outside funds, creating a high taxpayer burden and jeopardizing its ability to sustainably fund public services. Florida. Despite its reputation as a retirement haven, Florida ranks as the worst state in the nation for aging in place. This is primarily due to a severe shortage of professional caregivers, with only one home health aide for every 56 seniors, ranking 50th. Additionally, it ranks poorly for housing affordability, with 30.7% of seniors being housing cost burdened. The high senior population has paradoxically created intense competition for limited resources, making independent living challenging. Georgia has the unfortunate distinction of experiencing the highest rate of fraud and identity theft in the nation, with nearly 1,600 reports per 100,000 residents. This problem is widespread, with major metropolitan areas like Atlanta ranking among the top U.S. cities for these crimes. This high rate of digital and financial crime stands as a significant threat to the financial security and peace of minds of its residents, contrasting with the state's otherwise strong economic and infrastructure indicators. Hawaii has the highest rate of homelessness in the nation, with over 80 out of every 10,000 residents experiencing it. This rate has dramatically escalated, fueled primarily by the state's extreme cost of living and high housing costs, which directly link to its homelessness crisis. The severe lack of affordable housing undermines the state's positive attributes, creating a visible societal crisis that contrasts starkly with its popular image as a tropical paradise. Idaho spends the least amount of money per student on public education than any other state in the nation at just $9,670 per student, significantly less than the national average of $16,340. This chronic underfunding has led to a larger class size and historically lower teacher salaries. Despite some legislative efforts to increase funding, this severe underinvestment represents a fundamental challenge to developing the state's future workforce and ensuring equitable opportunities for its children. Illinois ranks last in the nation for financial transparency, receiving a score of just 47 out of 100. The state is a poster child for bad budgeting, consistently failing to publish its annual financial report on time and presenting a distorted picture of its true fiscal health. This lack of transparency is a symptom of deeper issues, including a massive debt service and significant financial pressures, which undermine public trust and create a high-risk environment for taxpayers. Indiana receives the lowest amount of federal funding for public health on a per capita basis, at just $13.72 per person, a tiny fraction of what some other states receive. This low federal investment is compounded by a pattern of decreasing state-level public health budgets. This chronic underfunding creates a significant vulnerability in the state's ability to prevent disease, respond to health crises, and promote community well-being, despite its strong overall economic outlook. Iowa's economy has experienced the most sluggish growth in the nation over the past 5 years, ranking 50th for its trailing 5-year annualized GDP growth rate. Different than Delaware, the state also ranks as the worst in the U.S. overall for its economy due to poor performance in changes to GDP and low startup activity. While its current residents may enjoy high disposable income due to its affordability, its inability to innovate and expand at a competitive rate suggests a future of economic stagnation. Kansas demonstrates a significant failure in providing mental health treatment to its youth, ranking 44th for the rate of youth with an untreated major depressive episode, or MDE. This means a high percentage of severely depressed young people are not receiving care. This deficiency is part of a broader problem. The state also ranks poorly in providing health coverage for adults with mental illness, potentially contributing to a cycle of untreated mental illness within families. Kentucky consistently bears the heaviest cancer burden in the U.S., ranking first for both overall cancer incidence and cancer mortality deaths. Its death rate is 17% higher than the national average, primarily driven by the highest in the nation rate of lung cancer. This tragic status is linked to high smoking rates, environmental exposures, and socioeconomic barriers that hinder early screening and treatment, making cancer diagnosis in Kentucky most likely to be fatal. Louisiana is the least healthiest state in the nation, ranking 50th for the second consecutive year. It ranks at or near the bottom in every major category, including social economic factors, health behaviors, and health outcomes. This poor health is driven by a very high premature death rate, high economic hardship, and low high school completion rates. These interconnected factors combine to produce the worst overall health outcomes in these United States. Maine. Maine is one of the only handful of states that imposes an estate or inheritance tax, a policy that contributes to its poor economic outlook, 45th nationally, and places it at a competitive disadvantage for retaining wealth. This policy is part of a broader fiscal structure that makes Maine the fourth highest tax state in the nation overall. This combination of high income and corporate taxes, along with the estate tax, contributes to its reputation as a high tax, low growth state. Maryland. Maryland residents endure the second longest average commute time in the nation at 31.5 minutes, which is nearly 18.5% higher than the national average. The state suffers from the highest traffic volume in the nation, with extreme congestion concentrated in the Baltimore-Washington metropolitan region. This daily gridlock is a significant costly drain on the time and resources of its residents, despite its state's high rankings in other quality of life metrics. Massachusetts. Massachusetts is the most expensive state in the nation for childcare by absolute dollar cost, with the average annual cost being a staggering $24,000. This exorbitant cost is significantly higher than any other state and places an immense financial burden on families. For a single-parent family, the cost of center-based childcare consumes an average of 48.51% of their median annual income, creating a major barrier to workforce participation and financial stability. Michigan. Michigan has the lowest quality of roads and bridges in the United States, according to the Reason Foundation's 28th Annual Highway Report. The state's transportation system ranks 50th overall, primarily due to the condition of its structurally deficient bridges. Over 10% of Michigan's bridges are rated structurally deficient, the highest percentage in the nation. Furthermore, the state ranks in the bottom 10 for the condition of its urban interstates and rural primary roads, indicating a pervasive problem with road quality across the entire state. The poor state of infrastructure is particularly striking for a state whose history is intrinsically linked to the automotive industry. Minnesota. Minnesota's tax system is considered the most burdensome in the nation for economic freedom. The Fraser Institute ranked Minnesota 50th out of 50 states for its tax policies, driving the state's low overall economic freedom and ranking. The state's tax structure is punitive due to its high rates across the board. Minnesota ranks poorly for its top marginal personal income tax rate of 9.85% and its corporate income tax rate. Furthermore, it is one of the few states that still imposes an estate tax, earning it a last-placed ranking. This combination creates a significant disincentive for investment. While Minnesota ranks highly in quality of life areas, its tax system poses a major obstacle to its long-term economic competitiveness. Mississippi. Mississippi has the lowest level of park access in the United States. According to 2020 data, only about 30% of its population lives within a half mile of a park, placing it at the bottom of the nation alongside West Virginia. This lack of public green space has significant implications for community health, limiting opportunities for physical activity and mental well-being. This last place ranking is part of a broader regional disparity in the South. The low park access reflects the state's other deep-seated challenges, as Mississippi consistently ranks poorly in national metrics, including health outcomes, poverty, and education. The lack of accessible parks is a critical failure in public infrastructure, impacting residents' health and quality of life. Missouri. Missouri provides the least amount of state-level funding for its public schools relative to its economic capacity, making it more reliant on local funding than almost any other state. According to an analysis by the Missouri Budget Project, the state ranks 46th in the nation for state revenue dedicated per K-12 student. This forces an overwhelming reliance on local property taxes to fund education, with local sources accounting for 59% of school funding in Missouri, compared to the national average of 46%. This funding structure creates one of the most regressive and inequitable school systems in the country. Montana. Montana has the highest concentration of hate groups per capita in the U.S. According to a 2020 analysis of Southern Poverty Law Center data, the state was home to 5.61 active hate groups for every 1 million residents. While the total number of groups was small at 6, the state's low population gives it the highest per capita presence in the country. 4 of these groups espouse white supremacist ideology, a troubling presence in one of the nation's least racially diverse states. Nebraska. Nebraska has the second highest rate of reported foodborne illnesses in the nation, with 74.4 cases per 100,000 people. This rate is substantially higher than the national average of 48.8. This public health challenge stands out as the state's most prominent negative outlier, as Nebraska otherwise ranks in the top tier for its economy and infrastructure. The high rate suggests potential regional issues in food supply chains or agricultural practices in the northern plains. Nevada. Nevada ranks as the worst state in the nation for mental health, different than Alabama ranking the worst for mental health access, placing 51st in the 2024 State of Mental Health in America report. This last place finish is determined by a dual crisis, a high prevalence of mental illness combined with severely limited access to care. The data indicates that Nevada residents are more likely to experience mental illness and less likely to receive treatment for it than people in any other part of the country, highlighting a critical and ongoing public health emergency. New Hampshire. New Hampshire imposes the highest property tax burden on its residents in the U.S., collecting over $50 for every $1,000 of personal income. This exceptionally high burden is a direct consequence of the state's unique fiscal structure, as it lacks both a general sales tax and a broad-based personal income tax. While this is touted as the New Hampshire advantage, it forces state and local governments to rely overwhelmingly on property taxes to fund public services, placing an immense burden on homeowners. New Jersey. New Jersey has the most expensive workers' compensation system in the country, imposing the highest costs on employers. The state has ranked 50th for its metric for 3 consecutive years, meaning businesses face a heavier financial burden for workplace injury insurance than anywhere else. This high cost is a key part of a broader, challenging business climate. The Tax Foundation also ranks New Jersey's tax climate as the worst in the nation, citing the highest corporate tax rate at 11.5%. New Mexico. New Mexico has the second highest violent crime rate in the nation, according to 2024 FBI data. The state recorded over 717 violent incidents per 100,000 residents, a rate more than 7 times higher than in Maine, the safest state. The state's struggle with crime doesn't stop there. It also has the third highest property crime rate and leads the nation in both larceny and burglary. This pervasive issue of crime severely impacts quality of life and contributes to its consistently low ranking for best states to live in. But we love you, New Mexico. New York. New York has the highest level of income inequality in the United States. A 2022 analysis shows the state has a Gini coefficient, and that is a measure of statistical dispersion used to quantify inequality, typically in income or wealth, ranging from 0 to 1, and New York State has one of 0.52, the highest in the nation. This extreme disparity exists within one of the world's largest economies. New York's $2.3 trillion gross state product ranks third in the U.S., and New York City's gross metropolitan product is a $2.29 trillion behemoth. However, this immense wealth is not broadly shared. The concentration of high-paying finance and tech jobs drives this divide, leaving a significant portion of the population behind. North Carolina. North Carolina ranks as one of the most challenging states for senior care, placing 47th in a study by Becca Life Settlements. This near-bottom ranking reflects significant dissatisfaction and systemic issues within the state's senior care infrastructure, which includes nursing homes and assisted living facilities. This poor performance is a significant negative outlier for the state, suggesting widespread problems like understaffing, inadequate quality of care, or high costs for its growing elderly population. North Dakota. North Dakota is the least environmentally friendly state in the U.S., ranking last in a study of sustainability metrics by IT Asset Management Group. The state's last place finish is driven by its exceptionally poor performance on emissions. Since 1970, North Dakota's carbon dioxide emissions per capita have increased by an astonishing 205%. By far the largest increase in the nation. This is largely due to the state's significant role in the oil extraction sector, combined with poor rankings for recycling and waste management. Ohio. Ohio is one of the least friendly states for worker choice regarding union membership, as it is not a right-to-work state. This policy earns Ohio a 50th place ranking in this specific category, a position it shares with 23 other states. The absence of this law means that in many unionized workplaces, employees can be compelled to pay union fees regardless of whether they wish to be members. Proponents argue that it protects union strength and worker solidarity. Opponents argue this policy infringes on individual freedom and creates a less attractive business climate. Oklahoma. Oklahoma's K-12 schools are among the worst performing in the nation, with one analysis ranking its performance as the 7th worst. This is evident across multiple standardized tests. The state ranks in the bottom 10 for academic proficiency scores for both 4th and 8th graders. Furthermore, Oklahoma students' average scores on both the SAT and ACT college entrance exams are among the 10 lowest in the U.S. This consistent underperformance is a fundamental problem for the state. Oregon. Oregon's public school system is ranked among the 10 worst in the nation. A 2025 Wallet Hub report places Oregon in the bottom tier of states alongside New Mexico and Alaska, reflecting systemic challenges in both academic performance and the resources available to students and teachers. This poor educational standing is a significant negative indicator for the state. On one hand, Oregon ranks relatively well in overall health and is recognized for having high transit access, and U.S. News & World Report has ranked Portland, Oregon among the best cities to live in the nation. On the other hand, it was listed by Consumer Affairs as one of the worst states to move to, and it has a high percentage of bridges in poor condition, suggesting broader infrastructure and quality of life challenges, representing a failure to invest in the human capital necessary for its long-term social and economic well-being throughout the state. Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has one of the highest percentages of structurally deficient bridges in the nation, ranking 5th worst. A 2019 analysis by FreightWaves of Federal Highway Administration data found that 15.3% of the state's bridges, over 3,500 in total, were classified as structurally deficient. While not a last place rank, this massive infrastructure problem is one of the state's most prominent failings. This high number of deficient bridges poses a daily risk to public safety and creates a significant drag on the state's economy by impeding the efficient transport of goods and people. This issue underscores a long-term failure of investment and maintenance in the state's critical infrastructure. Rhode Island. Rhode Island has the highest percentage of highway bridges in poor condition in the entire country. According to a 2022 analysis, a staggering 17.1% of the state's highway bridges are rated as poor, a rate more than 3 times the national average. The state has struggled with its aging infrastructure for years. While there has been a marginal improvement, the percentage of poor bridges decreased slightly between 2000 and 2022. The state has been unable to escape its position at the bottom of the national rankings. The high number of deficient bridges, particularly on critical highway systems, poses a significant risk to public safety and creates inefficiencies in the state's transportation network. While other states face infrastructure challenges, Rhode Island's distinction as having the absolute worst highway bridges in the nation points to a long-term failure of investment and maintenance that directly impacts the daily lives of its residents and taxpayers. South Carolina. South Carolina has the lowest concentration of mental health providers per capita in the United States, ranking 50th. This severe shortage of professionals, including psychiatrists and counselors, creates a provider desert where residents have extremely limited access to necessary mental health care. This last place ranking for provider availability is the primary driver of the state's overall 50th place composite score for mental health care, representing a fundamental barrier to care for its residents. South Dakota. South Dakota has the highest rate of reported foodborne illnesses in the United States. CDC data shows the state experiences an average of 92.2 cases per 100,000 people, a rate more than double the national average of 48.8. This last place public health ranking is a significant negative outlier for a state that otherwise performs well. The data indicates that residents of South Dakota are at a higher risk of contracting illnesses from their food more than people anywhere else in the country. Tennessee. Residents of Tennessee who seek mental health treatment face the highest average out-of-pocket costs in the nation, ranking last for its affordability metric. This means the direct financial burden placed on individuals is greater than anywhere else, creating a significant barrier to receive consistent care. This extreme cost barrier is a key component of the state's broader mental health crisis, as Tennessee also ranks 42nd overall for mental health and has the lowest percentage of mental health offices. Texas. Texas has the highest percentage of residents without health insurance in the United States, ranking 50th for its percentage of insured people. This creates the most significant healthcare coverage gap in the nation. This lack of insurance is a primary driver of the state's poor performance in broader safety categories, as uninsured individuals are less likely to seek preventative care. This leads to worse health outcomes and places a substantial financial burden on both individuals and the state's healthcare system. Utah. Utah ranks as the worst state in the nation for women's equality, consistently placing 50th in national studies. This last place ranking reflects significant disparities between men and women across key dimensions, including income, the prevalence of executive positions, and representation in the state legislature. This finding represents a stark paradox, as Utah is frequently celebrated as the best managed state in the country, suggesting its model of prosperity is not equally shared by all of its residents. Vermont. Vermont is tied for the worst economic outlook of any state in the 2025 Rich States Poor States report by richstatespoorstates.org. The state has consistently ranked at the bottom of this index for over a decade. This dismal forecast is driven by high taxes and burdensome regulations. Vermont has the nation's highest property tax burden, ranking 50th, and also ranks 50th for levying an estate tax. These policies create a challenging environment for business investment and job creation. Virginia. Virginia's students have had the most difficult time recovering from pandemic-era learning loss in mathematics, ranking 51st in that category in the nation. According to research from Harvard and Stanford, the average student in Virginia remains nearly a full grade level behind in math proficiency compared to pre-pandemic levels. This last place finish is especially concerning because the state also saw some of the nation's biggest drops in scores, meaning students fell further behind and have been the least successful at catching up. Washington. Washington has the lowest number of police officers per capita of any state, a last place distinction it has held for 15 consecutive years. This chronic shortage is a critical factor in the state's broader public safety challenges. Washington has the fourth highest property crime rate in the United States, and also Hey, what's up? It's X. I got a quick little update here. So Washington state was ranked number 2 in the nation from 2019 to 2023 for stolen vehicles per capita. However, since 2023-2024, their rate has decreased by 32%, and that's because a lot of the catalytic converter rings that were stealing a lot of stuff were broken up in 2022, among other things, so Washington state no longer ranks as high as it used to. Anyway, back to how Washington doesn't have any cops. This long-standing failure to maintain adequate police staffing levels contributes to an environment where property crime is more prevalent than anywhere else. West Virginia. West Virginia has the highest rate of adult cigarette smoking in the United States. According to the American Lung Association, 21% of adults in the state are current smokers. This rate is significantly higher than the national average and a primary driver of the state's poor overall health outcomes, including one of the highest cancer mortality rates in the nation. This last place ranking for smoking represents a critical public health crisis that shortens lifespans and burdens the state's healthcare system. Wisconsin. Wisconsin ranks 49th in the nation for the growth rate of its residential construction, according to IBIS World's U.S. State Economic Profile, indicating a significant lag in the development of new housing. The state's $7.5 trillion total value of residential construction places it in the bottom half of the country. This low growth rate of construction activity is part of a broader pattern of sluggish economic growth, as the state also ranks 44th in 5-year GDP growth. This fundamental weakness in a key economic sector can lead to higher housing prices and a lack of job growth in construction. Wisconsin also ranks last in the nation for state education systems with the most racial equality and civic engagement, according to a 2025 study by WalletHub. Wyoming. Wyoming is the most dangerous state in which to work, with the highest rate of occupational fatalities in the United States. In 2023, the state recorded 16 deaths per 100,000 workers, a rate that is dramatically higher than the national average and more than 13 times the rate in Rhode Island, the state with the fewest workplace deaths. The last place ranking is confirmed by a 2025 report from the AFL-CIO, a massive union, which also identifies Wyoming as having the highest fatality rate. The state's high rate of workplace deaths is largely attributable to the prevalence of high-risk industries such as mining, quarrying, and oil and gas extraction, which are among the most dangerous sectors nationally to work in.
You're watching Perspective Reports.
If you want to explore the actual shame map for yourself, deep dive the visuals, get into the actual data, go for deeper insights, and see where the sources are, go to our website, perspectivereports.com/shame map for all of that info. The link will also be in the description. Thank you so much for watching.